Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And today we're taking a look at this little EDC fixed blade. This is the Bark River JX6. It's a Chris Tanner design, probably a knife that many of you are familiar with at least, although there's not a ton of stuff out there on the interwebs about it, which is actually a little surprising to me. Anyway, I will qualify this in this particular way. I'm not, this crazy huge Chris Tanner fanboy. I certainly don't feel any compulsion to go out and buy anything just because I know he designed it. But this particular knife did look pretty appealing. I've been familiar with it for some time and been very curious to check one out. And so when this guy came up, I was really pretty quick to snap it up. And I have not been disappointed. I've been pretty glad that I pulled the trigger on this knife, actually. So let's go ahead and get into some of the details, and I'll kind of talk about what I like and dislike, and hopefully be able to shed some light on this knife and indicate whether, or give you enough to know whether or not this is a knife that you might want to try out, especially if you're living in Canada these days, where they seem to feel like any knife that folds is somehow, crazy assault knife that's ready to leap out and kill everyone if it is allowed into the country. So start off with size and weight. This guy is 4 ounces, just the knife itself. With the sheath weighs about 3 ounces. And so together you're looking at around 7 ounces. 7/8 is the 7 3/8, I'm sorry, is the overall length on this guy, which for an EDC fixed blade is pretty good. And with that amount of space within that 7 3/8 inches, they've done a pretty good job, I guess. We can give Tanner credit here. He's done a pretty good job of giving us a useful handle and useful blade. Oftentimes there's a trade-off there that isn't well managed, but this one has done a good job. 3 5/8 on the overall blade length, but notice there's quite a bit of finger choil right here, which means you're only getting about 3 1/4 inches of cutting edge. In terms of grip area, if you measure from here, the bottom of this sort of ricasso to here, you get about 4 inches. So in fact, in terms of comfort in hand, it's pretty good, and it does give you a nice full 4-fingered grip. So that I have no issue with either. As you can see, there are a lot of things going on here that are kind of coming together into a pretty nice blade. Now, I will say this is normally where we comment on carry. I'm going to save most of those comments until we get to the sheath discussion, because there are a couple other things I want to say about that. But overall, I will say this is pretty unobtrusive to carry. Okay, it's pretty comfortable. It rides, if you do put a belt through here, which I've only done a couple of times, it does ride nice and high and sort of out of the way and inconspicuous, which I like. If you don't bother with the belt, which I rarely do, and just carry it in pocket, treating this sort of like a pocket slip, it works quite well that way. It's very slim and very comfortable to carry in that configuration as well. So now that we've kind of gotten that out of the way, and as I say, I'll have a little more to say about how this knife carries and what I would like to see when we get to our sheath discussion. So blade on this guy is CPM 154. You've got a clip point blade with a lot of belly here. In fact, it's all belly. And it's got a partial convex grind, which is actually pretty nice. Now, I had a whole video about convex grinds and why I've started to appreciate them more and more. I won't go into every bit of that detail here, but I'll say a couple of quick things. Number one, convex grinds are very stable. They hold their edge for a long time. They're easy to sharpen, and in fact, very budget friendly to sharpen. And also give you an extremely good edge geometry without being unstable. So they're able to get quite thin here behind the edge, but still have a good amount of strength, so you don't have to worry about that rolling or giving you problems. So all of those things come together in this knife to provide a blade that is really useful. It's good for slicing. It's good for, I've used it to, cut up the apples for my kids' lunch. I've used it to do some slight wood carving, to cut up cardboard, all kinds of things. Everything that I've done with this blade, it really just loves to cut. So I've got to give a lot of credit. The blade here is really well done as a utility EDC type blade. This is an absolute win. And of course, in the CPM 154 steel, the performance in terms of edge retention and corrosion resistance is very good. Now, There is an A2 version of this, which is going to still be good steel. It's going to hold an edge well. It just won't be as corrosion resistant. All right. And so that's something to be aware of. In fact, you may be aware of that because Cedar Canada Gear and Outdoors had one of these knives that was labeled CPM 154, but turned out to be A2, which is a pretty easy mistake to have happen. The other thing I've got to say about this is if you're looking for a particular version, the A2 or the CPM 154, that could be a bit of a challenge for you because these are not super highly produced. You know, you can't just run out and buy one any old time you want one. You may have to do a little searching, or you may have to do a little waiting till the next production run comes along. And you know, that I'll talk about that more again in my overview. But in terms of the blade, yeah, this blade is a huge win. And honestly, from using this and a couple of other Bark Rivers, I'm becoming a bigger and bigger fan of the convex grind. Let's move on now and talk about the handle. The handle on this particular one, as you can see, is canvas micarta with a polished finish. And I like canvas micarta. In fact, I might like it a little more than linen micarta because of that little bit of extra texturing. I do really appreciate the grip that this knife gives you. And even with a polished finish, you're going to get quite a good hold on it. I really appreciate that. The one thing I will say, it's very comfortable in hand. I have no issues with the grip. It definitely lends itself to a saber grip more than a hammer grip. A hammer grip is okay, but because this part of the blade is very slim, I find most of your strength in a hammer grip is right here. Okay, so that's these front two fingers and your thumb where you're wrapping around. Well, because of the slimness here, that's where you have the least amount to hold on to. So in a hammer grip, I don't find this as good. In a saber grip, I find it absolutely fantastic. So that is something to keep in mind. In a reverse grip, it's actually very good. I really like this knife in a reverse grip. And of course, probably you've seen the, I think it's, oh, I'm gonna get the name wrong. It's not JX, maybe it's a bush bat. Sorry, there we go. The bush bat version of this knife has a ring here. And that, you know, I looked at that and I thought, man, I like the blade. I like the handle shape. Why does it have that stupid ring on it? So I'm really glad that this came along. So that's all I'm going to say about, there is another version of that. And I just don't like it, of this, that I don't like as much because of that ring. So the only ergonomic knock that I would give this knife is that it gets very slim here. I could have handled just a little bit more meat right in this portion so that that front finger had just a little more substance to grip onto. The other thing is it doesn't create a hot spot or anything, but you do end up with a good portion of your front finger on just the metal here. Again, it's not a problem and I've never felt any discomfort from it, but I could sort of anticipate that being a potential issue. Even though in my experience it hasn't been. So I know, you know, sometimes you can say, well, Kevin, it's a little unfair to pick on a theoretical issue, but I like to point those things out just in case somebody does have that problem. At least, you know, I can say, well, I did address it a little bit in the video. So the handle, yeah, very good. Now, of course, there are tons of different handle materials and probably you're going to have your own preference. I do really like the canvas micarta, and I think I would look for that in other fixed blades because of that nice grippy texture that it has. Now, let's go ahead and talk a little bit about the sheath. All right, so this sheath is just a plain leather sheath. It's very thick. You can see this is generally the way Bark River does their sheaths. And there's a couple things I would say about this. One, I find Bark River sheaths for the price of the knives don't look as clean and as polished and as finished as I think they should be. All right. They're always very functional. They always retain the knife well. I've never had any issues from a performance standpoint, but I just don't, I feel like I've spent quite a bit of money here on a knife from Bark River. I would like the sheath to look a little nicer. Now this one does look nice. It's worn, it's been treated with some oil, and so all of that has cleaned it up a little bit. The one thing that I should point out about this knife is if you look back here, okay, you can hear that knife being sucked in. I'll show you again from this perspective. There you go. There's a magnet in here, okay? And here's my suspicion, okay? I suspect when they put this knife together, because of that slim handle, they were having issues with retention. That's my suspicion. And so to aid in retention, they put that magnet in. Now, with it in there, yeah, the knife is very secure and I have no problem, you know, carrying this. I wouldn't want to carry it upside down because I can get it to come out if I really work on it. The way, honestly, that I carry this about 99% of the time is dropped into my pocket like a pocket slip. The other way, one of the things I really like to do with it is carry it in the high hip pocket that you get on 511 jeans and the 511 Ridgeline pants. That's about my favorite way to carry it. Otherwise, I just carry it in my front pocket the way I would carry a folder. So, I guess when you do have it on a belt, I will say, I like the fact that it carries up nice and high. So think about it. If your belt is here, you know, this knife is well up and kind of out of the way, makes it pretty inconspicuous. And for an EDC fixed blade, I like that. You could make an argument, and lots of people have, that for sort of an outdoors type of knife, you don't want that. You want the knife to ride a little lower, and some guys will even put it on a dangler so that it goes way down their leg. That's fine in that application, but for an EDC fixed blade, I really feel like I want that knife nice and high. So if I feel the need to, it's going to be covered up by my shirt or my coat or whatever else I'm wearing. The other thing is, if it's a knife I'm going to carry all day, I've got to be able to sit down in chairs and in the car and not have the knife interfere with, you know, that comfort level either. And so the higher up, it is less intrusive that way. Now, after saying all of that, the big thing that I have to say about this knife is I wish I had a nice Kydex sheath for this that was well set up for horizontal carry. I think this knife would be great sort of in a kidney carry. You know, if you could get this sheath to kind of go onto the front of your hip right here and carry in this configuration for sort of a cross draw, that would be a really nice way to carry this knife. But this sheath does not accommodate that really at all. I guess you could put a strap through here and carry it that way. But the way it's set up, it's just not ideal for that. I don't know. I've toyed with the idea of having a Kydex sheath made for this, and we may get to that point eventually. So anyway, just that's the one thing I wish that was a Kydex sheath. And in fact, although it would kind of, I don't know, go fly in the face of their more traditional look, I would like to see Bark Rivers doing Kydex sheaths. I just find them much more versatile and to give me a lot more carry options than you normally get out of a leather sheath. So that's my take on the sheath. Let's go ahead and get some comparisons in here. There are a number of knives that I've got, including one really special one that I'll bring in at the beginning. This is a gorgeous custom LT Wright Gen 2. Absolutely beautiful knife. You can see the one thing that I will say is really nice about this knife is in hand, it is absolutely comfortable. It is really great. And I can see the ability to do some really hard work. In fact, that slightly larger handle, one of the things you really notice when you grab this, that front finger or in a hammer grip, it's going to be really good. And so it kind of solves that issue that I have with the JX6 here. Notice this knife has been magnetized by the magnet in the sheath, and so it kind of sucks this other knife in. So wanted to share that with you. Beautiful knife. It is visiting for review. Since we're talking about Bark River, let's get the Bark River Tusk. The Tusk is a bigger, heavier knife for sure, and you can see the blade stock difference there is rather significant. I also find this linen micarta much more attractive, although not quite as grippy. Now, again, there's more substance here. So when I grab this knife in a hammer grip, I feel definitely more confident. It's also still very comfortable in a saber grip. Sheath is, again, a Bark River sheath, which is giving you the same issues. Let's grab a couple more. I've got the Charade. What Charade is this? The SCHF 55. This is kind of a sharpened pry bar type of knife. And, you know, I have carried this. I have used it a fair bit. I think my son is going to be inheriting this knife. I will probably reprofile it even more before I give it to him. This knife is stupidly thick behind the edge, which limits its usefulness in pretty much every application. You know, it's not going to slice. It's not going to carve really well. So I'll probably reprofile this a little bit and see if I can't get some better performance out of it, and then pass this on to my son. Now, the one thing I do like is the sheath on this knife, good retention and versatile. So I can flip this in a number of different ways to get it to carry just the way I want. And the way I have it right now is to set up for behind the back, sort of low back horizontal carry. The other knife I've got here is the Tops T-Bow. Again, hold on, I'm gonna come up and take this off camera. A favorite EDC fixed blade of mine. Now, one thing I will say is this. I feel like the JX6 is a much more efficient knife, okay? The T-Bow is not that much smaller now when you consider the Kydex sheath. Yes, that makes a bigger difference. By the way, this is a pain in the neck. There's no thumb ramp or anything on this, which is really annoying. But I love the Tops T-Bow. I've carried this a ton. And I do really, really enjoy it. Throw that guy in there as, sorry, hold on, there we go. Throw that guy in there as one last comparison. And finally, to get to my overall thoughts on this very attractive knife. All right, so I definitely like the blade. In fact, I love the blade. I love the convex grind. I love the steel on this one. I'm glad I was able to pick up the CPM 154 version over the A2 version. Not that A2 isn't a great steel. I just like that little bit of extra stainless. I like the handles. I like the canvas micarta. That's one thing I will say. The canvas micarta is pretty grippy. So if you got this in another finish, it may not be as grippy. It may not have as positive a feel in hand. All right, but I find this knife to be very ergonomic, very nice in terms of size and carry. And so overall, I've got to say this is a huge win, even with the Bark River sheath that I'm not totally in love with. If you had a canvas, if you had a Kydex sheath made for this knife, I think it would be a huge win because it would give you just a little more versatility in how you were going to carry it. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and let me know what is a fixed blade that you like to EDC and how do you carry it in the comments down below.